As a watch collector myself, I will be the first to admit that my fascination with these small little objects is borderline out of control at times. And I would say collectively, watch collectors can be a bit crazy for how passionate they are about just collecting in general. So what I wanted to do in this video was look at some watches and watch brands that have very enthusiastic followings and rabid followings and are passionate beyond the norm that you'll typically see among other watch collectors. Now, this video is intended to be lighthearted in nature. I am not trying to make fun of anyone, and quite frankly, I'm almost personally attacking myself here because I am a part of many of these groups. And I think at times you can't take yourself too seriously. I mean, we are talking about small little objects at the end of the day, but when there's passion, it's also just fun to see why maybe someone is so passionate about a watch and what can we learn from that. So that's just the point of this video. Also, before we jump in, we have some great new releases from Tissot that just were unveiled. One being from the Gentleman line. This is their new Ice Blue. It's kind of a mix of the mint and the Ice Blue edition that we saw from the PRX and fusing it within the Gentleman case. The Gentleman, by comparison to the PRX, has now become, I would say, underrated. This one delivering on the standard spec that you'd like to see, the upgraded spec with that movement. And then in addition to that, you're also getting that everyday versatility that people know and love from the Gentleman collection. Also another model, probably the best value Swiss chronometer on the market currently, with the Tissot 1938. Swiss chronometer, just over $800. It's a COSC certified Swiss-made watch. Pretty compelling value here and hard to beat. Also, we did see some new releases from the PRX line with the PRX Gold, now available in 35mm and 40mm in a Powermatic version, long awaited. We only had the coarse versions for a long period of time, so glad to see those finally here. Also, the PRX Mint now being available at 35mm. And finally, the PRX Ice Blue Glacier Edition at 35mm with that Powermatic movement on the inside. If you want to check these out, a link will be in the description down below. So I have around 6 different watches and watch brands that I thought fit the mold here of having this cult-like status of collectors that are just so enthusiastic. The first one here, I would argue, is the one that came to mind originally and almost was the reason why I wanted to create this video. This was a watch that when it was unveiled and shortly after in the 2000s and 2010s, for a while, it was the prerequisite to watch collecting. Not to say that I believe in that idea that you have to collect a watch to become a watch collector, but if there ever was one that could lay claim to that, it was this watch, and that is the SKX. Unveiled in 1996, this watch has come to embody and represent what so many people think of when they think of Seiko overall, especially with the dive watches. Although it's probably not fair to say this because this watch is now going on 30 years old, if it did came out today, I think many people would ultimately drag it if it was released as a new product. Non-hacking movement, no hand winding. Accuracy somewhat leaves a lot to be desired. This is a movement that's in the entry-level Seiko 5 models and now has been moved away from altogether. Then you have competition from other brands and Seiko themselves. It makes it a tougher idea to swallow that the SKX is a watch that makes a lot of sense in 2023. But even if this watch is considered obsolete by many standards, there are so many people that will just never get over this watch. I've owned one. So many people have this nostalgic view of like almost looking back to their heyday in high school, just something like that. It just has this nostalgic feel. You just remember that rudimentary idea of watch collecting and how this was a watch that represented it. If you go after this watch, people will be ready to throw fists with you. It's kind of crazy. It's at the time a $200 watch, and people are more passionate about this watch than almost any other to almost ever exist. At least it's in the running, no question about it. Another aspect of its mystique is the modding community, and you have entire websites, forums, small businesses being created off a single model and existing because of a single model. This watch is an icon, and it absolutely deserves kudos for what it has done for the watch collecting community. And I think there are so many people out there that will just fight to the death defending this watch till the end of their days. For the next watch here, it's one that I classified as being a watch under $100 that has this cult-like following. I actually released a video on this, and I think it has like 800-something thousand views, a ridiculous amount of views for just a single watch, especially one that is more of a niche pick. It's not a watch that's going to appeal to everybody, but the watch is the Vostok Amphibia. Now, no affordable watch requires more hoops to jump through than the Vostok Amphibia. You usually have to go to a sketchy website and then you have to buy one. Tracking number, absolutely forget about it. It shows up when it wants to show up. The design department for these things basically entails how crazy can we get. Dial designs are nuts, quirky but effective features with its wobbly crown system that does have an intended purpose, screw down case back sealing, and its friction fit bezel. Now these watches are not sexy at all by really any standard, but given how ridiculously simple they are, and the questionable buying channels that come off as more of a drug deal than a watch purchase, it makes the entire experience and the watch more endearing as an end result. The hoops you have to jump through, how simple but ingenious the engineering is for these watches, galvanizes fanboys and fangirls to love these watches. And I am not the target audience for these watches. They're not really my taste, but when I was spending more time with them over the past 5 years, I have just come to respect them for what they are. They're just a manufactured watch done well at a ridiculously reasonable price that simply does the job. And there's this whole mystique around these watches and how you get them, and also just the fact that they're so dang affordable, especially by today's standards, with many watch brands just increasing prices over and over again. It's a breath of fresh air, and people will fight you when it comes to going after the Vostok Amphibia. They'll also be one of these watches that people will bring up without any mention whatsoever. Looking at a $1,000 watch, people will be like, hey, I can get 10 Vostoks for that money. Why would I look at this watch? You just get that type of comments over and over again with these watches. So the people that love these things truly love them. The next watch we have here is one that I would say is the most iconic watch of all time, and that is the Rolex Submariner. There's no other watch that has had so many people dedicate their lives and livelihoods to a single model. I am absolutely convinced there are people out there that are having fistfights over debating if that's a Mark I dial or not. Lovers and dealers of Rolex Submariners can list off reference numbers better than elected politicians can name amendments for the Constitution. It's pretty impressive. And there's honestly an entire language created by fans of this family. Talking Big Crown, Maxi, Smurf, Hulk, Comex, Kermit, Red Sub, No Hash Mark, Spider Dial, Tropical Dial, Mark I, Mark II, and even Nipple Dial. It is borderline out of control. But I absolutely respect it, and there are entire websites and dealers who have hundreds of thousands, if not millions in inventory just dedicated to the Rolex Submariner. It is as worthy of any as icon status and has this crazy following that has become almost a lifestyle in itself. Next is Panerai, or the Paneristes, and people forget how huge Panerai was in the early 2000s and 2010s, and I am not just referring to their case sizes. When the fans of anything are given a name, you know that they mean business and are probably not a group of people you want to mess with. What I admire about the Paneristes is how much they obsess and dedicate themselves to loving the brand. They usually have a broad collection of Panerais. They're exceptional at navigating the sometimes confusing reference numbers and are still diehard enough to brave the 2000s forum sites that look like they haven't been updated since George W. Bush was in office. Panerai fans, I think, are also very self-aware, which I appreciate. They recognize that the watches are not going to be for everyone, and even when it seems like the brand often does the exact opposite of what they want to see, they still have this tough but unconditional love for the brand. For the next watch or brand here, I wanted to really break down what is the better one to consider. I think you could put Casio as its whole subject, but I decided to just focus on the G-Shock because that has become so representative of Casio in general, and there is a certain thing about a Casio G-Shock collector that is really, really passionate. Now, the G-Shock is easily one of the most important watches ever made, and it has the strongest hoarding risk of any watch brand and type. So there was a question that a NBA reporter asked Vince Carter. He was an NBA player who played since the late 1990s, was known as one of the most athletic players of all time, but he played into his 40s, and he was by the tail end of his career, losing a step, didn't have the vertical that he once did by any means. But somebody asked him, what are you going to do? Are you going to play another season, as he was getting into his older years? And he responded by saying, I got one more in me. That is G-Shock owners in a nutshell. They always have room for one more G-Shock in their collection. Sure, we might already have 15 different G-Shocks. Sure, they might look basically all the same. But then you think to yourself, this new one is only $100. The value is incredible. Oh, John Mayer came out with a new G-Shock in a limited edition that is made to look like a vintage retro keyboard. count me in. Take my money. G-Shocks are also one of those watches that establish diminishing returns to an extreme degree. So far to a point where people will bring up G-Shocks in almost any scenario. There could be a video or an article discussing a high horology minute repeater or perpetual calendar, and I can almost guarantee there's at least one comment, maybe one joking, but other ones that are more serious, saying that their G-Shock could do the job and it only costs them a fraction of the price. And although it is just an absolutely insane idea to compare something like that to a Casio G-Shock, you can't get mad at them because technically they aren't fully wrong. This next one is one that I am absolutely a part of the group, and I will state it proudly, but it is important to acknowledge that we can be a little bit crazy, and that is just Grand Seiko. The brand basically went from not being known outside of Japan to now having one of the most enthusiastic followings of any brand in the entire industry. We hear the word Zaratsu, spring drive, or some other list of terms, and we get all riled up quickly. Grand Seiko fans also greatly appreciate the engineering tech of the brand and are willing to do those nerdy deep dives to understand how things work. And in turn, it also creates this enthusiasm that makes you not want to get on their bad side. It in some ways is like a fraternity sorority type of collective fan base. And just like any watch brand, there are going to be some that might not like the brand. But when someone online does not like Grand Seiko, I find that many people and that are fans of the brand will attack those people in great numbers, which I'm not gonna say I condone, but it does happen, no doubt about it. I think Grand Seiko has one of the most rabid followings of any brand, and well-deserved in many respects. Some of this comes from their underdog factor compared to Swiss counterparts and the quick rise the brand has experienced in delivering some truly remarkable movements and dials for the money. But I think another aspect is how GS invests back into their collectors to create this level of just camaraderie among them. An example of this is their group known as GS9. I went to their main annual event last fall in Brooklyn, and I was able to meet many of you, as well as just see other collectors, and you just got this level of enthusiasm and camaraderie that was really unique. Grand Seiko reminds me of like a critically acclaimed indie rock or progressive rock band that has these passionate followings that really go the extra step in their fandom. Like some of the main rules of music debate online is like, don't argue with like a Tool fan or a K-pop fan, Taylor Swift fan. Like these people will come after you. I don't want to say Grand Seiko is exactly like this, but no doubt passionate people that collect this brand. But all right guys, that is my take looking at 6 of the most passionate followings for watches and specific watch brands. What do you think? Do you agree with my take that these are some of the watches and watch brands that really separate themselves when it comes to collector enthusiasm? Are there other brands that you would include in this list? Leave some comments down below. Also definitely check out teddybaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.